Hello and welcome. I'm Bee. I'm a poet, blogger, writer, and novel critic, and you're watching my channel, Beewrites, where we talk about novels, writing, and all things literary. So, boil yourself up a cup of tea, and let's get talking. I'm going to be answering the age-old question, am I a good poet? I'm not talking am I, I'm talking about you. So stay tuned and find out. Without further ado, let's talk about the fit today, because I don't know, I put a little effort.
Respect the fit.
Shirt. It's called Perfect. It's got a little kitty wearing glasses on it. Oh, look at the cute little earrings, a little bow tie, little glasses. Cats are the best. Fight me on that.
Do it.
Okay, so the first thing you gotta really evaluate before you start writing poetry, you gotta appreciate it's an art form. Just like all writing, it's just as much as if you were picking up a paintbrush and painting on a canvas, you know? But you're doing it with words. And there's something to be said about you being critical about yourself. And of course, your poetry is going to be different from someone else's poetry because it's your art. It's like your baby. And once you become like a poet or writer, you'll see that. And you'll want to protect your baby. And you won't want people judging your baby. That's very much how I feel. And I feel like since it's art, it comes in many different ways and forms. And doesn't mean it always has to rhyme. Doesn't mean it has to be in some sort of scheme where the stanzas are matching up and they're all aligned all pretty, because it's art and you're gonna do whatever you want with that art, and you're gonna have fun doing it. And I 100% anyone starting to try out and write poetry, because personally I think it's one of the easiest ways of like self-expression, because I don't know, the way I do it, I just sit at my little MacBook, I just type, and I kind of have like, I call it my table of contents, and I'll write down, you know, how I'm feeling that day, or maybe I'll say stuff I like. Oh, let's talk about trees, let's talk about words, let's talk about books, and I'll just write how I feel about that. And the next thing I'm gonna go into is figurative language. Okay, there's so many types of figurative language, and that's what really makes books, writing, poetry really come alive, because you're saying what you mean, but you're saying it in a different way. You're not really being straightforward with it. You're being all artsy and fancy with it. So there's different types of figurative language. There's similes, metaphors, onomatopoeias, hyperboles, personification. I'm blanking on the other ones, but
Idiom, oxymoron, alliteration.
So first you gotta really think about those and see how you can incorporate those into your poems. And for me, it's, I really spitball, but if I'm saying like, oh, this felt like this, you know what I mean? Or as if it was, you know, what I'm really doing right now is I'm taking the emotion of kind of like sadness, or to be more fancy with it, let's call it melancholy, which is one of my favorite words. So I'm taking that and I'm personifying it as a person. And that's personification, because you're taking something that's not alive, like a feeling, an emotion, an animal, whatever, a mountain, and you're personifying it as a person, and that's personification. So basically just add figurative language to your poems and they will look a lot better. The next thing you have to consider about poetry is that there's so many different forms, and what you really have to do before you start reading is research. And that means just basically reading outside of what you usually read. Like say, hey, you only like reading romance. Well, maybe you need to pick up that poetry book, or, you know, look at some Shakespeare stuff, because there's so many different forms. Like in that Japanese one, like haikus, where it has to have like different lines and syllables and whatnot. Personally not my favorite, but my favorite right now is spoken word. And you know, it's kind of poetry, but it feels like a speech, and it feels like they're yelling at you sometimes. I really love it. Like if you go on YouTube and look one of them up, they're just amazing. Maybe I'll post some of mine, but there was also this guy on America's Got Talent not too long ago, and he was actually the first person to do spoken word on America's Got Talent, and I think he got one of the golden buzzers, and he was just so good.
What a man of talent.
So spoken word is basically, what I did for one of my drama classes was, it was like a monologue. And my teacher was like, wow, this is really good. I think it's one of the best things a student of mine has ever written before. And I'm like, oh, okay. And she's like, it really reminds me of spoken word. And that's how it kind of I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to look into this. And I love it. And the other stuff I write is also a mixture of lyrical poetry and free verse poetry. So lyrical is basically you're talking about your emotions and just, spilling it all out into the paper. And then free verse is you're kind of getting crazy with it because you're not really rhyming, like the stanzas and the little chunks of writing, they're not really adding up, but it's very artistic. And I think you should try it because it's my favorite. The next thing I'm going to say about poetry is to not really get into like a rut of like your emotions, because if say you're not feeling really good one day and you're listening to the same sad music and you're reading the same sad book, watching the same sad movie, same show, you gotta mix it up. You gotta have a little happy poems in there, you gotta have some sad poems in there, but basically just mix it up, because if you don't, you're gonna fall into a rut of one thing and you're just gonna feel really happy all the time or really awful. So that's my opinion. Right now I'm actually putting together a little poetry book that I got going on. And so right now I have like half happy, half sad, and that's totally good. That's totally fine. And it really breaks it up and makes me happy, so you should try that. And the final thing I'll talk about is really falling in love with your poetry and your art and your work. Me personally, I haven't really shared a lot of my work before. That's like, because it's my baby, and I don't want people judging how my baby looks.
I'm shy.
And, I'm going to have to step out of that shell one day and maybe share it with a close friend.
But, where?
Yeah, so fall in love with it, not too much, and be open to criticism, because that's what this whole world is about.
Oof, yes, 100%.
And fall in love with your child, your poetry. And I hope you have just as much fun as I do writing poetry. And I really hope you enjoyed this video, because I enjoyed making it. Very good tea today. This is my second video, bro. This is good. And I would like you to subscribe and like this video. Maybe pass it along to your fellow nerds. And thank you for watching. I don't know how long this is gonna be. It might end up being pretty long. But you can look down in the description where to follow me and whatnot. And stay tuned for the next video, bro. It's gonna be pretty good.
Check out my previous video. It was on books I hated reading in school. I have a new one coming out about writing, so stay tuned for more and please subscribe.